Chapter 22. The Old Lady and Curdie. Up the stairs they went, and up the next, and through the long row of empty rooms, and up the little tower stairs, Irene growing happier and happier as they ascended. There was no answer when she knocked at length on the door of the workroom, nor could she hear any sound of the spinning wheel, and once more her heart sank within her, but only for a moment, and she turned and knocked on the other door. "Come in," answered the sweet voice of her grandmother, and Irene opened the door and entered, followed by Curdie. "You darling," cried the lady, who was seated by a fire of red roses mingled with white. "I've been waiting for you, and indeed getting a little anxious about you, and beginning to think whether or not I would be better to go and fetch you myself." As she spoke, she took the little princess in her arms and placed her upon her lap. She was dressed in white now, and looking, if possible, even more lovely than ever.
"I've brought Curdie, grandmother. He wouldn't believe what I told him about you, so I brought him."
"Yes, I see him. He is a good, brave boy. Aren't you glad you got him out?"
"Yes, grandmother, but it wasn't very good of him not to believe me when I was telling him the truth."
People must believe what they can, and those who believe more must not be hard on those who believe less. I doubt if you would have believed it all if you had not seen some of it yourself.
"Ah, yes, grandmother, I dare say. You are right. But he'll believe now."
"I don't know that," replied her grandmother.
"Won't you, Curdie?"
said Irene, looking round at him as she asked the question. He was standing in the middle of the floor, staring and looking strangely bewildered. This, she thought, must come from astonishment at seeing such a beautiful lady.
"Make a bow to my grandmother, Curdie," she said.
"I don't see any grandmother," answered Curdie, rather gruffly.
"Don't see my grandmother when I'm sitting on her lap?"
exclaimed the princess. "No, I don't," reiterated Curdie in an offended tone.
"Don't you see the lovely fire of roses, white amongst the red this time?"
asked Irene, almost as bewildered as him. "No, I don't," answered Curdie, almost sulkily.
Nor the blue bed, nor the rose-coloured counterpane, nor the beautiful light like the moon hanging from the roof?"
"You're making a game of me, your Royal Highness. And after all we have come through together this day, I don't think it's very kind of you," said Curdie, very much hurt.
"Then what do you see?"
asked Irene, who perceived at once that for her not to believe him was almost as bad as for him not to believe her. "I see a big, bare garret room, like the one in my mother's cottage, only big enough to take the cottage itself and leave a good margin all around," answered Curdie.
"And what more do you see?"
"I see a tub, and I see a heap of musty straw, and a withered apple, and a ray of sunlight coming through a hole in the middle of the roof and shining on your head, and making all the place look curiously dusty brown. I think you'd better drop it, princess, and go down to the nursery. That's a good girl."
But don't you hear my grandmother talking to me?"
asked Irene, almost crying. "No, I hear the cooing of a lot of pigeons. If you won't come down, I will go without you. I think it will be better anyhow, for I'm sure nobody who meets us will believe a word we say to them. They will think we've made it all up. I don't expect anyone but my own father and mother to believe me. They know that I won't be telling stories."
"And yet you won't believe me, Curdie,"
expostulated the princess, now fairly crying with vexation and sorrow at the gulf between her and Curdie. "No, and I can't help it. I can't," said Curdie, turning to leave the room.
"Oh, what shall I do, grandmother?"
sobbed the little princess, turning her face around to the lady's bosom and shaking with her sobs. "You must give him time," said her grandmother, "and you must be content not to be believed for a while. It's very hard to bear, but I had to bear it, and shall have to bear it many times yet. I will take care of what Curdie thinks of you in the end, but for now you must let him go." "You're not coming, are you?" asked Curdie.
"No, Curdie. My grandmother says I must let you go. Turn to the right when you get to the bottom of the stairs, and that will take you to the hall where the great door is."
"Oh, I don't doubt I can find my way out. Without you, Princess, or your old granny's thread either, said Curdie quite rudely.
Oh, Curdie, Curdie!
I wish I'd gone home at once. I'm very much obliged to you, Irene, for getting me out of that hole, but I wish you hadn't made a fool of me afterwards. He said this as he opened the door, which he left open, and without another word went down the stairs. Irene listened with dismay to his departing footsteps, then turned again to the lady.
What does it all mean, grandmother?
She sobbed, and burst into fresh tears. It means, my love, that I did not mean to show myself. Curdie is not yet able to believe some things. Seeing is not believing. It is only seeing. Remember I told you that if Lucy were to see me, she would rub her eyes and half forget what she saw and call the other half nonsense?
Yes, but I would have thought Curdie...
You are right. Curdie is much further on than Lucy, and you will see what will come of it. But for the meantime, you must be content, I say, to be misunderstood for a little while. It's very anxious. We are all very anxious to be understood, and it's very hard not to be. But there's one thing more necessary.
What is that, grandmother?
To understand other people.
Yes, grandmother, I must be fair. For if I'm not fair to other people, I won't be worth being understood myself. I see. So if Curdie can't help it, I won't be vexed with him. I'll just wait.
There's my own good dear child, said her grandmother, and pressed her close to her bosom.
Why weren't you in the workroom when I came up, grandmother?
Asked Irene after a moment's silence. Well, if I had been there, Curdie would have seen me well enough. But why should I be there rather than in this beautiful room?
I thought you would be spinning.
I've nobody to spin for at present. I never spin without knowing for whom I'm spinning.
That reminds me. There's something that's puzzling me, said the princess. How are you going to get the thread out of the mountain again? Surely you won't have to make another for me. That would be awfully troublesome.
The lady set her down and rose and went to the fire. Putting her hand in, she drew it out again and held up the shining ball between her thumb and finger. I've got it now, you see, she said, coming back to the princess, all ready for when you want it. Going to her cabinet, she laid it in the same drawer as before. And here is your ring, she added, taking it from the little finger of her left hand and putting it on the forefinger of Irene's right.
Oh, thank you, grandmother. I feel so safe now.
You're very tired, my child, the lady went on, and your hands are hurt with the stones, and I've counted 9 bruises on you. Just look at what you are like. And she held up her little mirror which she had brought out from the cabinet. The princess burst into merry laughter at the sight. She was so traggled from the stream and dirty with creeping through narrow places that if she had not known it was her reflection, she would have taken herself for some chimney-sweep child who had their face only washed and hair combed once a month. The lady laughed too, and lifted her up upon her knee, and took off her cloak and nightgown. Then she carried her to the side of the room. Irene wondered what she was going to do with her, but asked no questions, only staring a little when she found she was going to be laid down in the large silver bath. For as she looked into it, again she saw no bottom, but stars shining miles away, and it seemed a great blue gulf. Her hands closed involuntarily on the beautiful arms that held her, and that was all. The lady pressed her once more to her bosom, saying, "Do not be afraid, my child."
"No, grandmother," answered the princess,
and with a little gasp, she was instantly found herself sinking into the cool water. When she opened her eyes, she saw nothing but a strange, lovely blue over and beneath and all about her. The lady in the beautiful room had vanished from her sight, and she was utterly alone. But instead of being afraid, she felt more than happy, perfectly blissful. And from somewhere came the voice of the lady, singing a strange, sweet song, of which she could distinctly hear every word, but of which the sense she had no feeling, no understanding. nor could she remember a single line after it was gone. It vanished like the poetry in a dream, as fast as it came. In years after, however, she would sometimes fancy that snatches of melody suddenly rising in her brain must be little fragments and phrases of the air of the song, and that very fancy would make her feel happier and more able to do her duty. How long she lay in the water she did not know. It seemed a long time, not from weariness, but from pleasure. But at last she felt the beautiful hands lay hold of her, and through the gurgling water she was lifted into the lovely room. The lady carried her to the fire and sat down with her in her lap, and dried her tenderly with the softest towel. It was so different from Lucy's drying. When the lady had done, she stooped to the fire and drew out a nightgown, as white as snow.
"How delicious!" exclaimed the princess. "It smells of all the roses in the world, I think."
She stood up on the floor. She felt as if she had been made over again. Every bruise and all the weariness were gone, and her hands were soft and whole as ever. "Now I'm going to put you to bed for a good sleep," said her grandmother.
"But what will Lootie be thinking? And what am I going to say to her when she asks where I've been?"
"Don't trouble yourself about that. You will find it all comes right," said her grandmother, and laid her into the blue bed under the rosy counterpane.
There's just one more thing," said Irene. "I'm a little anxious about Curdie. As I brought him into the house, I ought to have been the one to see him safe home."
"I took care of it all," answered the lady. "I told you to let him go, and therefore I was bound to look after him. Nobody saw him, and he's now eating a good dinner in his mother's cottage far up the mountain."
"Then I will go to sleep,"
said Irene, and in a few minutes she was fast asleep.